So Representative Emmer made a big statement on central bank digital currencies. Now, I just will mention Representative Emmer will actually be on First Mover next week to go through all of this, but we're going to dig into what he actually said. He made a series of tweets talking about CBDCs. Essentially, the crux of it is that he doesn't think the Federal Reserve, the central bank, should have the ability to create CBDCs directly for individuals. Now, generally, so that people understand the layout of how the Fed works, generally they kind of work through these intermediaries. These intermediaries are private institutions, so you don't really have the government directly dealing with individuals. You have these banks and all of that. And with CBDCs, what they're talking about now is potentially the Federal Reserve creating these coins that could be directly accessible with individuals. They might have private accounts, all of this, which it opens a can of worms. He digs into what this is in a series of tweets. He said, other countries like China develop CBDCs that fundamentally omit the benefits and protections of cash. They collect personally identifiable information on users. They track their transactions indefinitely. Not only does this CBDC model raise single point of failure issues, leaving Americans' financial information vulnerable to attack, because we know the government is not that great at protecting our data. They're hacks all the time. But it could be used as a surveillance tool that Americans should never be forced to tolerate from their own government. He then says requiring users to open an account at the Fed to access a United States CBDC would put the Fed on an insidious path akin to China's digital authoritarianism. The Fed must be open. A CBDC implemented by the Fed must be open, permissionless, private, must be accessible to all. He goes on. I mean, what he's saying is really great, actually. And it's what we talk about on the show all the time. I'm kind of gobsmacked that they're talking about this. I'm going to throw to you, David, to kind of dive into some of this.
I think I'm the only person who didn't actually have their hand up.
Oh, really?
I will just quickly echo what you said. This was a very impressive statement, and his emphasis on cash and anonymity, especially cash. I think that there's too few people in general, and especially too few legislators who understand how important cash is from a privacy and equity perspective. So that was really great to hear, and I will definitely be tuning in for the interview on Monday. Let's go to Jen, who
not Monday, next week though.
Procedure.
No.
Oh, sorry, Tuesday.
Let's go to Zach. I feel like Zach has something really juicy to say by his facial expression. So let's go to Zach, and we can come back to
that
me.
little smirk.
I'm calling BS on this one, guys. The tweet thread is way longer than the amendment. The bill is one sentence. Get that in the bill.
It's true.
The director's cut tweet thread
short.
was way spicier than the bill. The money is not where the mouth is on this one. Twitter fingers, man. We need to see the real goods in the bill. The bill is vanilla, boring, plain. The clicks were great on Twitter. It's not in the bill. I'm calling BS. Run this clip when Emmer comes on. Let's do it.
Zach, I've got to push back. I've got to push back because you want the laws for government to be short. You want it to be concise. You want their role to be like clearly defined. You don't want pages and pages of people pontificating about all of this stuff. That's not really what they're for. Like, I don't think they need. So we're talking about it because he's explaining the context.
Let me read the sentence.
The context
Let me read the sentence. Let me just read it.
Let
me just read the thing that's in the congressional record, okay? Except as specifically authorized under this act, a Federal Reserve Bank may not offer products or services directly to an individual, maintain an account on behalf of an individual, or issue a central bank digital currency directly to an individual, end quote.
So the more words you put in a bill, the more words you put in a bill, the more wiggle room there is for regulators. If he started to put disclaimers saying like, oh, it's because of this privacy, whatever, regulators have the opportunity to say, oh, well, then we'll not do anything related to this privacy thing, but we'll still do this other thing because we're still, adhering by the essence of the bill and the intention behind it. Like that's why you don't want people to pontificate because you don't want that wiggle room. You want it to be as concise and with as concrete language as possible. So I think that the fact that he took to Twitter, he explained the reasoning, like a lot of people are going to read that bill and be like, so they can't directly create a thing. I don't even understand why this would be an issue. So he's gone and clarified that elsewhere to say this is why this is an issue, because of the surveillance. It would give the government direct access to all of our financial records. This is like, we're already in a really bad situation where they can basically call on banks and get that information from the banks, but they can't get it from our cash transactions at least. So, you know, we've still got a little bit of privacy. He's saying no, a CBDC needs to retain that benefit of cash. It needs to retain that anonymity, those privacy elements. It cannot be with the Federal Reserve. They cannot have direct access to that information. We're on a, you know, sliding descent towards totalitarianism akin to what China's got going on. So I mean, why you gotta be such a Emmer hater, Zach? I think this is great.
I just want to see the goods in the bill. I want to see the goods in the bill.
I feel like Zach should be
Plenty
on
of
first
bills
mover on Monday.
have explanatory language. I'm not. I bow out. It's a great first step. We're seeing a lot of conversation about CBDCs lately for some reason, whether it's from the BIS trialing something with Swiss Central Bank, whether it's UK legislators voicing similar privacy concerns. It's really interesting to see how this is going to shake out. And especially this distinction that's sort of under-discussed but very clearly alluded to in this bill is the difference between a wholesale CBDC, which is for settling accounts between banks, and a retail CBDC, which is something that you and I would use for day-to-day transactions. So it's going to be interesting to see how this manifests itself. But, you know, whether it's the Boston Fed hiring a CBDC specialist or all this chatter that we're seeing around central bank digital currencies in these last couple of weeks, it's kind of reaching a fever pitch. I'm kind of interested to see what all shakes out. But hey, that's for another hash. That's for another hash on another week. Oh, Naomi, I'll give you the last word.
Last word.
I grant
she
you the
always
last
has
word.
to have the last word.
She can have it. You can have it.
I just think that you're right. We will see what happens. It doesn't, just because a bill is proposed doesn't mean it gets passed. People propose bills all the time and nothing ends up happening with them. Sometimes they're not even voted on. So we'll see what happens. But I will say that this is absolutely the right direction we need to be moving in our narrative around CBDCs, because currently the whole narrative has been hijacked by regulators who are saying how dangerous, you know, stable coins are and how bad it is for money laundering and all of this. No one has taken the opposition and saying, you know, we need things that represent cash. We need our digital world to carve out some space of privacy for us. And Emmer has kind of stepped up to the plate and said, okay, I'll provide that narrative. I'll put through this bill. It might not go anywhere, but I'm at least going to get this talking going so that people start thinking about the other side of the coin. It's not all about regulation and some of the bad guys. It's also about enabling freedom, you know, people's right to, you know, their financial activities. And so I think it's great that he started this conversation. So I'll just say that.